Thomas had spent 28 years crafting a peaceful existence in Maple Grove, a leafy suburb of Raleigh, North Carolina, alongside his husband, Daniel. At 55, Thomas was a retired librarian, his days filled with tending roses and rereading Tolkien in their book-strewn home. Daniel, 53, still thrived as a marketing consultant, jetting off for client meetings with a suitcase and a smile. They'd raised their daughter, Sophie, now 27 and a graphic designer in Charlotte, and weathered life's storms, job losses, Sophie's teenage rebellion, a cancer scare in 2015. Thomas believed their marriage was a rock, forged in quiet nights and shared dreams. He was wrong. The cracks appeared in January 2025, subtle but sharp. Daniel, once chatty about his day, turned cagey. He'd hunch over his phone, thumbs flying, then slam it face down if Thomas glanced over. "Just work," he'd mutter, avoiding eye contact. Late-night calls, muffled behind the study door, dragged past midnight, Daniel's voice low and tense. Thomas, pruning azaleas one morning, asked about a weekend trip to Durham. "Client emergency," Daniel said. "Too quick, too clipped." Thomas nodded, swallowing unease. They'd always trusted each other. Why doubt now? Maple Grove buzzed with its usual rhythm, neighbors waving, kids biking past their red brick colonial. Thomas loved its predictability, the way it mirrored their life, steady, unflashy. He'd met Daniel at a Raleigh book fair in 1996, a whirlwind of shy smiles and coffee dates. They'd married in 2014, the day North Carolina legalized it, Sophie cheering in a pink dress. At 28 years, Thomas thought he knew Daniel's every quirk, the way he hummed off-key, his love for spicy ramen. But as winter deepened, those quirks felt like masks. Daniel's suitcase sat packed more often, his excuses thinner. Thomas lay awake, the guest room's silence pressing in, wondering when their story had started rewriting itself. By February, Thomas's unease grew roots. Daniel's work calls became a nightly ritual. 11 p.m., study door shut, his voice a murmur through the walls. Thomas, sipping chamomile in the kitchen, strained to hear but caught only fragments. "Can't wait. Soon." He'd ask casually over breakfast. "Big project?" Daniel's eyes darted away. "Yeah, deadline stuff." The vagueness gnawed at Thomas. After 28 years, he knew Daniel's tells, lip-biting when stressed, fidgeting when lying. Both were there now. Then came the trips. Daniel announced a weekend in Asheville, meeting a new client. He left Friday, back Sunday, suitcase lighter than usual. No ties, no laptop charger. Thomas found it odd. Marketing meant presentations, not casual jaunts. He checked Daniel's desk for clues, a scribbled note. 8 p.m., Blue Ridge. A client's initial? A restaurant? He Googled it. Blue Ridge Cafe, a romantic spot in Asheville. His stomach twisted. "Just tired," he told himself, tossing the note. But doubt lingered like damp rot. Sophie called that Saturday, her voice bright. "How's Dad's trip?" Thomas hesitated. "Fine, I guess. Busy as ever." She laughed. "He's always been a workaholic." Was he? Thomas wondered. Daniel had balanced work and home before, coaching Sophie's soccer, grilling on Sundays. Now, he barely ate with Thomas, claiming exhaustion. The phone obsession worsened. Daniel locked it with a new passcode, smirking when Thomas asked why. "Privacy," he said, as if Thomas were a stranger. One night, alone with the hum of Maple Grove's crickets, Thomas sat on their porch swing, replaying their years. Had he missed signs? Daniel's charm had won him over decades ago. Those hazel eyes, that easy laugh. They'd survived Sophie's birth, his coming out to stern parents, the lean years. This felt different, not a storm to weather, but a rift widening underfoot. He didn't want to suspect an affair, not after 28 years. But as Daniel's car pulled in Sunday, headlights slicing the dark, Thomas's gut whispered, something's wrong. March brought Thomas's breaking point. Daniel left for Durham, another urgent meeting, his goodbye kiss perfunctory. Thomas watched him drive off, then acted. He'd never snooped. Trust was their glue, but trust was fraying. In the study, he rifled Daniel's desk, receipts, pins, a Durham hotel stub, $180, 2 nights, no client dinner listed. Odd. He checked the laptop, usually off limits, but Daniel had left it logged in. Emails loaded. Work stuff? Then one from Jay, "Missed you at Blue Ridge. Next time." No context, no last name. Thomas's pulse quickened. He grabbed Daniel's spare phone charger, forgotten in a drawer, and plugged in his own device to think. Jay could be anyone, a colleague, a friend. But the tone felt intimate, flirty. Thomas scoured their joint bank app next. $200 at a Durham wine bar, $50 at a florist. Daniel hated flowers. He'd never bought Thomas roses in 28 years. The evidence was thin, but it piled up like storm clouds. He needed more. That night, he called Sophie, fishing subtly. Dad mention anyone new at work? She paused. Not really. Why? Just curious, Thomas lied, heart sinking. He couldn't tell her, not yet. Instead, he dug deeper. Daniel's coat hung by the door. Thomas patted the pockets, gum, keys, a crumpled note, J. Friday, 7, Oakwood. Oakwood Inn, a boutique spot in Durham. Another lead. He photographed it, hands shaking. This wasn't the Daniel he knew, the man who'd cried at Sophie's graduation, who'd built their life brick by brick. Maple Grove slept as Thomas sat in the dark, evidence spread on the kitchen table. Hotel stub, note, bank charges. Not proof, not yet, but a pattern. He felt foolish, 28 years, and he was playing detective. But the alternative, blind faith, felt worse. Daniel's car rolled in at dawn, tires crunching gravel. Thomas hid the clues, forcing a smile as Daniel trudged in. Good trip. Yeah, Daniel mumbled, avoiding his gaze. Thomas nodded, resolve hardening. He'd keep digging. The truth couldn't hide forever. By April, Thomas turned methodical. Daniel's trips grew frequent. Every other weekend, always Durham or Asheville. Thomas tracked them on a calendar, 8 in 3 months. Too many for work. He decided to follow. Friday, Daniel left at 5 p.m., claiming a late meeting. Thomas waited 20 minutes, then tailed him in their old Subaru, heart pounding. Raleigh's traffic thinned as he hit I-40, Daniel's silver Toyota a speck ahead. At Durham, Daniel parked at Oakwood Inn, not a client office, but a quaint hotel with ivy-draped walls. Thomas idled across the street, watching Daniel stride in. No briefcase, just a duffel. At 7:05, a man, tall, late 40s, sandy hair, met him in the lobby. They hugged, lingering, then vanished upstairs. Thomas's chest tightened. Not a meeting. He snapped photos through the windshield. Daniel's car, the hug, the hotel sign. Grainy, but damning. He sat there an hour, rain streaking the glass, debating confrontation. Not yet. He needed airtight proof. Back in Maple Grove, he reviewed the shots. The man's face was blurry, but the intimacy wasn't. Thomas cross-checked bank records, another $200 at Oakwood's bar, timed with the trip. He Googled the hotel, romantic getaways, discreet charm. Nausea hit. Daniel wasn't just distant. He was living a double life. Thomas paced their home, past Sophie's old drawings, their wedding photo, 2014, Raleigh Courthouse, joy etched in their smiles. Had it all been a lie? He called his friend Mark, a retired cop from Raleigh. Need advice, Thomas said, voice low. Mark listened, then sighed. Sounds like cheating. Get more texts, calls. Confront when you're sure. Thomas nodded, though certainty terrified him. He loved Daniel 28 years. Could he unlove him now? That night, rain drumming the roof, Thomas planned his next move. The stakeout wasn't enough. He'd go deeper, even if it broke him. May saw Thomas escalate. Daniel's phone was a fortress, knew passcode, always on him, but Thomas found a crack. Daniel synced it to their home iPad for work, forgotten in the study. Late one night, while Daniel slept, Thomas powered it on. Messages loaded, work chats, then James. Last night was amazing, James wrote. Can't wait for Asheville. Daniel's reply, your trouble. See you soon. Thomas's hands shook. James, Jay from the emails, the notes. He scrolled. Months of texts, flirty, explicit. Photos, Daniel at a bar, James kissing his cheek. Call logs, late-night talks, some while Thomas slept yards away. The iPad tracked locations, Durham, Asheville, pinned to hotels and cafes. Thomas screenshotted everything, evidence piling in a folder labeled, work. James was no client, mid-40s, a realtor from Durham, per a quick LinkedIn search. Handsome, polished, everything Thomas wasn't feeling at 55. The betrayal cut deeper with each message. Daniel had lied for months, years, while Thomas gardened, cooked, trusted. He found a text from March. Thomas suspects nothing. We're good. Cold, calculated. Thomas sank into the study chair, staring at their life crumbling in pixels. He built Maple Grove into a haven. Daniel had turned it into a stage. Sophie's graduation photos sat on the desk, Daniel beaming beside her. Had he been cheating then, too? Dawn broke as Thomas shut the iPad. He couldn't unsee it, 28 years torched by James. Anger mixed with grief. He wanted to scream, but silence held him. Daniel stirred upstairs, oblivious. Thomas wiped his eyes, steeling himself. The proof was ironclad now, texts, photos, dates. He'd confront soon, but first, he'd protect himself. Mark's words echoed. Get ready. Thomas wasn't just gathering evidence. He was arming for war. June 2025, a humid Saturday, Thomas chose his moment. Daniel returned from Durham, duffel slung over his shoulder, humming. Thomas waited in the living room, evidence printed, texts, photos, bank slips, spread on the coffee table. We need to talk, he said, voice steady. Daniel froze, eyes darting to the papers. What's this? Sit, Thomas ordered. Daniel did, wary. Thomas slid the stack forward. James, your client. Explain. Daniel paled, flipping through. The Oakwood hug. Texts, you're my escape, a $300 Asheville hotel bill. This isn't, he stammered. Don't, Thomas cut in. 28 years, and you're sneaking off with him. How long? Daniel slumped, rubbing his face. A year. Maybe more. More. Thomas's voice cracked. While I'm here, thinking we're fine? It's not you, Daniel said, feeble. James, he's different. I got lost. Thomas laughed, bitter. Lost? You planned this. Lied to my face. He jabbed a text. Thomas suspects nothing. Daniel winced. I didn't want to hurt you. Too late, Thomas snapped. You threw us away. Silence fell, heavy. Daniel stared at the floor. What now? I'm done, Thomas said. Get out. Daniel begged, tears, apologies, but Thomas held firm. Pack. Leave. By nightfall, Daniel was gone, duffel and all, to a motel or James. Thomas didn't care. Alone, he sat amid their life, Sophie's baby shoes, their vow plaque. Rage faded to numbness. He loved Daniel wholly. Now he had to unlearn it. Maple Grove's quiet mocked him, but he wouldn't break. Not yet. July was a blur. Daniel texted daily, I'm sorry, can we talk? But Thomas blocked him. Sophie called, confused. Dad's staying at a friend's. What happened? Thomas hesitated, then told her. The affair, James, 28 years undone. She cried, angry. He's an idiot. I'm coming home. She arrived in Maple Grove, hugging him tight. You're enough, she said. Thomas clung to that. He saw a lawyer, Ellen, in Raleigh. Divorce is straightforward, she said. You've got proof. Adultery strengthens your case. Thomas nodded, signing papers. The house was his paid off years ago, but he'd split savings. Daniel could fight, but the texts were a slam dunk. Ellen filed by mid-July. Daniel was served at his motel. No contest, he signed, defeated. Maple Grove whispered. Neighbors noticed Daniel's absence, asked gentle questions. Thomas shrugged them off, pruning roses with a vengeance. Inside, he boxed Daniel's things, suits, books, a ramen cookbook, leaving them on the porch. Daniel collected them silently one rainy night, headlights fading. Thomas watched, feeling hollow. Sophie stayed a week, cooking dinners, blasting music. We're a team, she said. Her strength buoyed him. August brought clarity. Thomas gutted the house, new paint, Daniel's study now a gym. He joined a book club, laughing with strangers over Austen. Work beckoned. He took a part-time gig at Maple Grove's library, shelving stories again. Friends rallied. Mark brought beers. Sophie sent silly texts. You're not alone, Mark said. Thomas believed it, slowly. He dug into James online. Divorced, flashy, a realtor with a trail of exes. Daniel's type, apparently. Thomas wondered what he'd lacked. Youth? Excitement? Therapy helped. You didn't fail, his counselors said. He did. Truth sank in. 28 years weren't wasted, just ended. He kept the wedding photo up, not for Daniel, but for Sophie, for what they'd been. Nights were hard, empty bed, quiet halls, but he coped. Gardening became therapy. Roses bloomed fiercer. He sold Daniel's old grill, bought a bike, rode Maple Grove's trails. Small wins stacked up. Daniel faded, a ghost, not a wound. Thomas wasn't healed, but he was moving. September 2025, Daniel emailed, subject. Please. I messed up, he wrote. James dumped me. I'm lost. Can we try? Thomas stared, anger flaring, then cooling. He'd gathered proof to end this, not fix it. No, he typed. You chose him. Live with it. Send. Blocked. Done. Sophie visited, bringing wine. He called me, she said, begging forgiveness. What did you say? Thomas asked. Told him to grow up, she grinned. They toasted to resilience to them. Maple Grove's leaves turned gold. Thomas felt it too, a shift. Daniel's plea was his mess now. Thomas had evidence of betrayal, but also of his own strength. He heard through Mark Daniel crashed with a cousin, job shaky. James had moved on, predictably. Thomas felt no glee, just distance. He'd loved Daniel once. Now he loved himself more. The house hummed with his rhythm, books, plants, Sophie's laughter. He was enough. October 2025, Thomas stood taller. The divorce finalized. House his, savings split, Daniel a signature on paper. He planned a trip to Charleston with Sophie, a week of history and sea air. No more shadows, he told her. Packing. She smiled. Just us. Maple Grove embraced him. Neighbors waved. Book club cheered his quips. He wasn't the cheated husband, he was Thomas, whole. Evidence had freed him, texts, photos, proof of a lie he'd turned into truth. Daniel's affair shattered 28 years, but Thomas rebuilt on the rubble. He biked past their old haunts, wind in his hair, and planted tulips for spring. Sophie texted a doodle, him as a superhero, cape fluttering. He laughed, framing it. One night, stars over Maple Grove, Thomas sat on the porch swing. The quiet wasn't empty, it was his. He'd gathered evidence of betrayal, but found more. Courage, love, a life reclaimed. Daniel was gone. Thomas remained. And that was everything.